My name is Yann Mercier. I'm with DG Energy, as said, in the unit in charge of the relations with the member states. I deal specifically with Estonia and Lithuania. So this is what we're going to talk about today, because with 27 member states, if I was to take all the good practices and the challenges for energy, would be there for a long time. So first of all, I'm going to speak about the situations of those two countries and why we came to think that this would be maybe some good two cases to talk about today. We're going to transfer to the challenges that these countries face, how they address them, thanks to what my colleagues mentioned before. And in this, they greatly ease my work, especially with the recovery and resilience plans. I will not cover the financing, be it public or private. I think you can, for this, resort to the slides that were discussed before. And we're going to move to what I would advise you to consult in terms of content online and of staff working documents, for example. So if you take a look at the graphs that you have in front of you, these are on the top, the energy mix for Estonia and Lithuania in 2021, before the energy crisis. And on the bottom, you have the energy mixes, the electricity mixes. So if we look at Estonia, for some of you that know, the part in orange is representing the oil share. Estonia is a massive producer of oil share. It guarantees some sort of energy independence, but of course the climate and consequences and the greenhouse gases emissions are hugely impacted by this energy mix. The electricity mix is also dependent on oil share. We have a very low proportion of gas, just to mainly add balance to the electricity mix. Those 41% of renewables are mainly biomass. We've seen some moments during the last few months with such high prices of gas that biomass played a huge role in the stability of the Estonian electricity grid. We will talk about it a bit later in the presentation, but Estonia is planning now to completely exit the oil share. We're talking about, in the current NECPs, 2035 as the last deadline for the stop of production of electricity from oil share, and 2040 for the production of oil share in total. This is bound to be even brought closer. We will see why in the presentation, but this is the situation when we talk for energy mix and electricity mix for Estonia. Lithuania is a bit more different. On top, the energy mix is a bit closer to what we would see in most countries, with a great proportion of renewables, also a lot of biomass in this case, but some solar, some wind, a big part of oil in the energy mix, understandably. And when you look at the bottom, you have 73% of the electricity that is produced in Lithuania that comes from renewables. This needs to be seen with the information that 75% of electricity that is consumed in Lithuania is imported. So if you take into account the electricity available for final consumption in Lithuania, the share of renewables is of course big, but it's not representative of the situation, because a lot of this electricity is imported. Lithuania has lost a lot of production capacity in the last few years, especially with the closing of the nuclear reactors in Lithuania. Lithuania is one of these rare countries that had nuclear and do not have it anymore, like Italy, for example. But if you look at Lithuania, a lot of this energy is imported, as we said, electricity, the fossil fuels. This differentiates Lithuania from Estonia. So in the energy crisis, we've had, we accompanied, and Estonia and Lithuania had luckily planned beforehand to divest from imports of fossil fuel or electricity, and to start reflecting on their own situation and how to increase their independence in terms of energy. Lithuania, for example, was very much hit by the high gas prices in the last couple of months, because as you can see, the electricity mix has 25% coming from gas. Obviously, the prices will hit that very much. And a huge proportion of the gas that is consumed in Lithuania is consumed by the fertilizers industry. That had to almost shut down its activity in the last couple of months. So this is a bit the situation of Estonia and Lithuania, with a lot more complexities. We know that the Baltics are still synchronized to the Russian and Belarusian grid. The works are being proceeded at the moment with the objective to synchronize out of the Brel grid, the Russian Belarus grid, with the European grid by the end of 2025. For very obvious reasons, and as well the Baltics had to act very quickly to stop the relations with Russia in terms of gas. The three countries, Estonia and Lithuania, sorry, have stopped all gas imports and all electricity imports from Russia, even though they are still connected with the electricity grid. We're talking about just physical flow that ensure the stability of the grid and not commercial ones. So this is the situation that we have, with, of course, a lot more complexities, but we also observe a great collaboration between the Baltics and, of course, with the rest of the EU on energy and electricity topics. Next slide, please. So if we could summarize the main challenges that both Estonia and Lithuania are facing right now, and that they need to address internally or through the NECPs, through the recovery and resilience plan, we could find the list that we have here. If you look at the first 3 points, those of you who are aware, this is exactly the 3 objectives of the Repower EU plan. We're talking about the reduction of reliance on fossil fuels that most often of the time are imported, a diversification of these out of Russia and towards new partner, Norway, the US, and let's say the piece that complements this is the acceleration of the deployment of renewables. These 3 points are completely compatible and even complementary with the Fit for 55 objectives, the European Green Deal. And to this, we can add some sort of main complexities that arise from these. We have, as I was saying, ensure the sufficient capacity of energy interconnection. So Lithuania with Poland, Lithuania with Sweden, Estonia with Finland, in order to plan for the next point, which is the synchronization with the EU grid, to allow for these countries to trade in an easy manner with the other European partners, to not participate to Russia's game. This links also to the next point, and this is a challenge that we see in a lot of member states, and probably one of the next big works of the Commission and of all the partners in the energy realm, is the strengthening of the domestic electricity grid. We know today that we're transitioning from fossil fuel energies toward renewables that have very different implications for the grid, and Estonia, Lithuania, and a lot of European member states are investing in their distribution and transmission grids. These are necessary if you want to have your grid ready to host, to have this capacity to distribute the electricity that comes from renewables, and to make sure that the electricity is not simply lost. The next point, increase the energy efficiency, of course, to reduce the consumption of fossil fuel, and to address a myriad of other different challenges, especially with energy poverty. We know that in Lithuania and Estonia, a lot of the building stock is very old. very energy consuming. We have huge extents of the population that are victims of energy poverty, living in places that are very expensive to heat, places that are potentially damp, um, that are unable to pay the energy invoices on time and need assistance. So the energy efficiency and the renewables, deployment of the renewables are very much interlinked. We also have the improving the sustainability of the transport system, but because I'm not from DG Move, I will not be touching on this point. But I know, for example, that there's a lot of work in cooperation between the Baltics to have a train system that would connect efficiently those countries to the neighborhoods. In the next couple of slides, I will focus mainly on accelerating the deployment of renewables and the energy efficiency, because these are the most low-hanging fruit. These are the more economically rational, maybe, activities that are being deployed, and these are, in my opinion, the most interesting ones if we are to cover these examples in a short time frame. So next slide, please. For Lithuania, I will take the case of the renewables. I'm going to talk mainly about what Lithuania is doing through the recovery and resilience plans, in partnership, of course, with the European Commission, sometimes funded, sometimes financed. Sometimes completely 100% EU funded, sometimes, of course, local actors, the government would also participate. So, and I invite you to do so. When you look online on the staff working group, on the staff working documents of the RRP for Lithuania, you will find a couple of milestones. You will find the entry into force of a legislation to improve the institutional and legal mechanism to promote the production of electricity from renewables. This means to regulate the conditions for action winners, to organize actions for renewable electricity, and to regulate the conditions for these auction winners to sell the electricity on the market under bilateral agreement, and to provide clarity for the investors, to attract, of course. To set long-term renewable energy targets for all the sectors, and to establish also easy and quick permitting. This is also one of the most central point of the Repower EU, is to ease the permitting, to unlock, be it political barriers, staff barriers, huge timeframes for reaching some permitting. So this is one of the central points of the work right now of most member states, but of Lithuania, of course, on renewables. This goes through a lot of preparatory work on the performance, on the development of offshore wind power plants. We have some examples such as studies on the implementation of the infrastructure. Lithuania is working a lot with its universities, with its private sector on this point, to find technical solutions, interesting technologies, available technologies to unroll. Of course, do cost-benefit analysis. My colleague earlier from Klima was talking about this, taking into account the carbon price in those projects, allows to determine the social value of projects, and how much Lithuania wins from putting those renewable projects on the line. This, only through the recovery and resilience plan, should lead to 302 megawatt by the mid 2026. This is on top of other projects that Lithuania is conducting, but these are the ones supported by the EU. And we were talking earlier about the grid. Lithuania is going to put on the line four energy storage installations of 50 megawatt with a double let's say objective to be able to regulate the electricity grid, the transmission one, the distribution one, to accustom it to host the renewable energy that is produced, but as well to prepare Lithuania and the Baltics to be able to link with Poland, link with the EU grid, and as well to be able to be ready in case which Russia decides to unilaterally desynchronize the Baltics out from the Brel grid. Besides this, the objective of Lithuania is to reach 7 terawatt hour of renewable energy electricity production by 2030. This should cover about 50% of the national electricity mix by then, and should be done majorly through some offshore wind farms that are economically very interesting. We have the technological capacity, and of course, this goes through a lot of work as well on the skills, a lot of accompanying the private sector to intervene in those regions. And I will transition to the next slide. In Estonia, we also have these very ambitious objectives on yeah. I see he jumped already to the next slide, but Estonia, it's fine, keep it. Estonia has recently adopted a very ambitious objective to have 100% of its electricity production coming from renewables by 2030. So if you keep in mind the electricity mix that we had at the beginning, with about 50% of oil share producing the electricity consumed in Estonia today, this is a massive gap to pass. And Estonia is conducting more or less the same projects that we see for Lithuania in Estonia, with the help of course, energy efficiency that will help to lower the electricity consumption. Estonia in the RRP is promoting the renovation, trying to reduce the administrative barriers to energy efficient renovation by advising apartment associations, landowners, also renters, private households, and local government to build the legislation, the technical needs, and to plan for the financing of the renovation. I will not go too much into the details, but as I said, if you or colleagues are interested in that, I invite you to look into the staff working documents that are available on the European Commission to get more details on the milestones, on the on how much money we're talking about exactly. So this support should lead to 2,600 multi-apartment dwellings to be renovated by the mid 2026, with some very precise objective of saving about 30% of the primary energy consumption at least. There's also, of course, some needs to develop more national plans that will, of course, have implications for the NECPs by 2025. There's some support for industrial sites to fuel switch to become prosumers in terms of creating their own electricity, and as well some support for the industrial sites to ensure the grid stability. One point that I wanted to mention is the just transition plan for Estonia, which I think is very relevant. As I was saying, we have a big oil shale production in Estonia, with a lot of jobs associated. In the eastern part of Estonia, that is majorly Russian speaking. Of course, you know, if you want to transition towards the renewables, you have to take into account these populations, and that's the whole essence of the term just transition. so Estonia, in collaboration with the European Commission, is planning for reskilling those workers from the oil shale industry towards the renewables, and to create some new jobs in the region, in whole of Estonia, but especially this eastern region, to make sure that these populations are in, they're in the carriage, in the wagon, and they also put the force and wind from this transition. I also invite you to go and look at the website to get more details on this just transition plan that was adopted last November. And that would be more or less how I would conclude on the slides. I think personally there's a couple of takeaways from these countries. We see that renewables are the tool to reach independence at a very, let's say, economically rational point. We see that the cost for renewables have lowered immensely. Of course, now there's issues on the supply chains. There's issues on finding enough capacity in the private sector, on skilling. But this is also things that we together as Europeans and the member states are trying to address through the critical raw materials, through the Net Zero Industrial Act, through the green skills plans. So, uh, and then because of course money is the key and finance is the key. Uh, there's it's quite obvious when we look at Lithuania and Estonia is that there's a huge potential from the civil society, from the prosumers or the consumers that produce electricity, to be part of this as well. So I think it's crucial to not neglect this potential. We were talking about the grid, to make sure that the distribution grid is able to host those prosumers, to host solar PVs on top of houses, to have the capacity to host also electricity that comes from renewable energy communities, not the same one that Peter was talking about, but those prosumers group that pull together and that have maybe an easier access to private finance and that are able to create their own green energy. So there's a huge potential on this to involve the prosumers. And of course, the local government, I think, is one of the key actors to not be forgotten. Tallinn this year is the European Green Capital. This is an award that is made by DG Environment. Tallinn has received it for a lot of reasons. Of course, we were talking the energy mix is not perfect, but it's also a country with very different situations compared to Sweden or Ireland. And I think we should also praise them for that. And I invite you to go look at the website for the European Green Capital and see the projects, the concrete projects that made Estonia, Tallinn, be the European Green Capital for this year. There's a lot of elements on climate adaptation, climate mitigation, mobility, energy, of course. Everything links together at the end of the day, and I think Tallinn is a very good example for that. So that's how I would conclude my presentation, and very happy to discuss or try to ask any questions that you would have. Thank you.